I want to welcome in our panel tonight. Chris Stirewalt, NewsNation political editor, Niall Stanage from The Hill, and Kellie Meyer, our correspondent in Washington, D.C. To you all, thank you for joining us. The president hit on a lot in the last 25 minutes or so. I want to start, though, with defining this speech. And Chris, I'll begin with you. How would you categorize what you just heard?
Well, it wanted to be something that was worthy of its location, right? Biden really wanted to turn in this historic kind of landmark speech. But this is what often happens with presidential addresses, the attack of the copy and paste brigade. And then they come in and they say, well, we ought to say something about this, and we ought to say something about that. We ought to say something about this. And I think what it ended up being was a pretty pedestrian kind of political speech for Biden, but sort of out of keeping with its location, certainly with those Marines there and on that, as he said, sacred site. I think it was a pretty ordinary kind of speech.
Niall, who was the president speaking to tonight? Was he talking to the American people? Was he talking to MAGA Republicans? Was he talking to Donald Trump?
I think he was trying to do all three and more, and therein lies part of the problem. This is a difficult needle to thread. On the one hand, I think he is clearly talking to more moderate Republicans. There was clearly an effort there to sort of carve away moderate Republicans from MAGA Republicans. He said in the early moments of the speech, Marnie, that he didn't think MAGA Republicans even represented the majority of the party. But more broadly, this speech, part of its purpose was actually to invigorate the Democratic coalition, which tends not always to reliably turn out in midterm elections, at the same time as it was aspiring to be a patriotic speech. Now, I think it did have patriotic moments. I think he avoided being overly polarizing. But to Chris's point, there was this rather grand vision presented at the start, and then this sort of laundry list of Democratic achievements welded onto it in the latter half. I personally thought that latter half was the less effective, but I thought the president actually did a good job in his main quest, which was to push back against what he sees as very dangerous demagogic tendencies in American politics.
And Kellie, no coincidence that the president delivered this speech from Philadelphia tonight. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy delivering words and remarks prior to the speech, and the former President Trump will be in Pennsylvania this weekend as well. This location important not just on the presidential stage, but in the balance of power. You've got a heated and contested Senate race in that state as well.
Oh, absolutely. There's a few reasons here. I mean, Pennsylvania helped send Biden to the White House back in 2020. This is a huge state that people are going to be watching this November, and you can tell by everybody passing through there this week, especially with those stops in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. I'm from there, so I know the focus on this county. This is a huge key swing county that was Obama for 2 years during those elections. Then it went to Trump. A lot of Trump support here. That's why you see McCarthy stopping in Scranton and Trump going to Wilkes-Barre this weekend, along with the focus that Biden is putting on Wilkes-Barre, on Philadelphia, and then going to Pittsburgh on Monday, those big races. And you see Trump-backed candidates like Doug Mastriano going for governor. You see Dr. Oz in the Senate. And as you mentioned, especially with those Senate races, those are really key to the balance of power here on Capitol Hill, whether or not Democrats will keep control of the House and the Senate, and how President Biden's agenda will get through for the next 2 years. But then just a note on his speech, as my colleagues were addressing. To me, I made a note that this was a bit like a mixtape. It was the best of Biden in his pre-campaign speech of unity, but then also mixing in his new midterm message of MAGA Republicans and Trump, and really trying to build some support from the Democratic base and fire them up as they head into the midterms, but noting and making sure he noted that not all Republicans are MAGA Republicans, trying to appeal to both Democrats and Republicans because it may be that swing vote that matters, especially in counties like Luzerne.
Well, Kellie, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that was right, the elephant in the room going into this speech. Would the president make a distinction between MAGA Republicans and other moderate Republicans throughout the GOP? He did say MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love, on the heels of what made news and headlines in his recent speech where he likened the MAGA philosophy to semi-fascism. Let's play a portion of what the president said tonight, making a distinction many thought he needed to do.
Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans.
Chris, chime in here. This is a balancing act, and the president, as I said, was expected to address this tonight, and he did.
Well, part of the balancing act that Biden has to pull off here is he is not very popular, and he's not very popular in Pennsylvania. But you know who's less popular than Joe Biden is Donald J. Trump. So the reason that Democrats' fortunes have been faring better this summer than they were before. If you look back at Memorial Day, where were the midterms going into Memorial Day? The Democrats were cruising for a bruise, and it was going to be a wipeout. They're going to lose 30 seats or more in the House. Senate looked like it would tip the Republican direction. Now it looks like Republicans are on their way to maybe a small majority in the House, and that is because the focus has been on Donald Trump and not Joe Biden. And the political choice here by Biden and the White House political team to put him out front and center, because Labor Day, as you know, is the traditional kickoff for campaign season, that you're going to shove Biden out in a primetime address. Well, that's good in the sense that it baits Trump, right? To draw Trump out more, that's good for Democrats because the more Trump, the better for swing voters. On the other hand, it's more Biden, and that's not good. His numbers went up when he was off the front page. So this is a tough one. I don't know that he pulled that off, but you got to give him credit for trying.
Yeah, 67 days. Who's counting until the midterms? I want to play a portion of what House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said tonight. Let's listen in and get your reaction.
Joe Biden has launched an assault on the soul of America, on its people, on its laws, on its most sacred values. He has launched an assault on our democracy. His policies have severely wounded America's soul, diminished America's spirit, and betrayed America's trust. For the past 19
Niall, I think the one thing that most people could agree on is that we are at a point where people are fed up, right? They're sick of the divisiveness, both sides blaming each other for everything. Both called for unity tonight while attacking the other. A lot of Americans saying two parties aren't enough. Talk to me about the rhetoric tonight from both sides, but specifically from Kevin McCarthy in that moment.
So the rhetoric here is about clearly painting each other as extremists. So, you know, President Biden saying, look at all these extreme Republicans. Kevin McCarthy saying, no, it's those guys who are extreme. And so that tends to just be a never-ending cycle. Obviously, it becomes a tit-for-tat cycle. To me, the interesting thing in both these speeches was the idea that the other party's extremism is not just bad in and of itself, but it distracts or avoids dealing with more day-to-day bread and butter issues that people face. Now, I think in the midterms, it's going to be very important who gets more traction with that argument. President Biden's argument is not just MAGA Republicans endanger democracy. It's that they are one thread in a broader strand that is also involved in, say, taking away the previous constitutional right to abortion and is so focused on grievances that it can't deal with day-to-day economic problems. Kevin McCarthy's argument is exactly the inverse of that, suggesting that President Biden is too focused on these things that he was talking about in his speech tonight, and that what is needed is a more even mundane approach to some of these day-to-day topics. Now, I don't know who's going to get traction with those arguments, but that is really the framework within which this debate is taking place.
Right. And what will ultimately drive people to the polls come November for midterms and in 2024? Kellie, I want to get your thoughts here before we head to break. Talking about the president's speech and who he is addressing tonight. He said, you can't love your country only when you win. He is clearly talking about the former president who will be giving his own speech in a couple of days in Philadelphia. Give us a preview of Donald Trump's visit to Pennsylvania here on Saturday and what we can expect in terms of who will show up and what he'll say.
Well, former President Trump heading to Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area this weekend. It will be his first time speaking publicly since everything that happened at his Mar-a-Lago home. President Biden really calling on, voters and really calling out Trump tonight. There's something that, in previous years or in 2020, President Biden, he really kept Donald Trump's name out of his mouth. And then this year, you started hearing it seep back in this midterm election year, calling him the great MAGA king earlier in May, and then moving into this rhetoric over the summer, still trying to thread in this message of unity and being careful to make sure that they keeps the American people connected and making sure he's this unifier here, but also going into that Trump is dividing the country, the MAGA Republicans are dividing the country. But again, even the White House making clear today that not all MAGA Republicans are, that they are focusing on here. It's not the MAGA elected officials are the ones they're focusing on here, not the MAGA voters, being careful not to isolate them, because still 74 million Americans voted for Donald Trump in 2020. So there's a careful balance here. And what we can expect from Donald Trump this weekend is absolutely a response to what we're hearing from President Biden. But I'll be curious to see what he has to say for his first public address since what happened at his Mar-a-Lago home. Marnie? And
President Biden tonight finishing his speech saying the United States of America, vote, vote, vote. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.